started reading, we're going to be reading this book, but before we go ahead and do that, let's go read our I can statements. We want to remember for today is I can read from left to right. So for example, the sentence, the cat is black, I started on the left side and continued reading to the right side. I read from left to right. The next I can we want to say is I can read from top to bottom. So if there's 2 lines on a page, we want to make sure we start on the top line and read to the bottom. So for example, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish. Our next I can is we want to make sure to say I can point under the words as I read. We don't want to put our finger on each word because if we put our finger on a word, we're not going to be able to see it. So as you see in the picture, we're going to be pointing under each word so we can read each word and make sure we're all reading the right word. The next I can we want to say is I can find the pattern in a text. The pattern in a text is going to be repeated words on every page. So for example, the big cat plays, the big cat hides, the big cat eats. We know each page starts the pattern, the big cat. We also want to keep in mind the author is the person who writes the words in the book, and the illustrator is the person who draws the pictures. Next today is the blank. So we know that each page is going to start with the word the. Our pattern of the book today is the blank. Let's go back and read all of our I can statements. Scholars, first me, then you. I can read from left to right. I can read from top to bottom. I can point under the words as I read. I can find the pattern in a text. And scholars, I want you to repeat after me. First me, then you. The pattern of our text today is the blank. The book we're going to be reading today. The title of this book is The Bookstore. This is our title. Down here we can see the author. Remember, the author is a person who writes the words in a book. This is our author, written by Sarah Goosen. The illustrator is the person who draws the pictures, and the illustrator of our book today is Beatrice Castro. The title of the text today is The Bookstore. This is the name of the book, so we know that the book is going to be about things we would see at the bookstore. These are real things we would see at the bookstore, so this text is nonfiction. Nonfiction means about real things, so they are not made up. Scholars, when I say nonfiction means, I would like you to say about real things or not made up. Are you ready? Okay. Nonfiction means good job. Nonfiction means about real things or not made up. This book also has a pattern. We saw this on our slide before we started reading. The pattern of the book today is the blank. Scholars, first me, then you. The pattern of our book today is the blank. The pattern of our book today is the blank. Great job, scholars. Let's go ahead and start reading. We remember that our first I can statement says that we can read starting on the left side of the page and reading to the right. I'm going to put an L because we want to start on the left side of the page. We also remember, as good readers, we want to make sure we start with the word of our pattern. The pattern of our text today is the blank. So if I know that's my pattern, I know this first word is going to be the. I'm going to point under each word as I read and read this page, the door. Great job, scholars. Let's go to the next page. We know, as good readers, like we said in our I can statement, is we want to start on the left side of the page. We also want to make sure we start with the first word of our pattern, which is the. So we're going to read this page, the room. Can a scholar tell me what side of the page we're going to start on? Great job. We are going to start on the left side of the page. Can a scholar also tell me what is the first word of our pattern? So what do we know this first word is going to be? You're right. The pattern is the blank. So we know this word is the books. We pointed under each word as we read. We read from left to right, and we used our pattern. Let's keep going. Scholars, we want to start on the left side of the page, and we're going to point under each word as we read, starting with our pattern. And who can tell me again what our pattern is? The blank. The helpers. Great job. We know good readers want to start on the left side of the page. We're going to start with the first word of our pattern, and we're going to point under each word as we read. The chair. We know good readers start on the left side of the page. We start with the first word of our pattern, which is the, and point under each word as we read. The story. We know we want to start on the left side of the page. We want to start with the first word of our pattern, which is the. We're going to read this page, the snacks. Scholars, I want your teachers to pause on this page. I want you to ask your scholars what side of the page they start on, what's the first word of our pattern, and how we're going to read this page. So teachers, you can go ahead and pause this, and when you unpause it, I'll go over it. Awesome. I'm sure lots of you had really good answers with your teachers, so we're going to go over it. We want to start on the left side of the page. We want to start with the first word of our pattern, which is the, and we want to point under each word as we read. The bookstore. Great job, scholars. You guys all did such a good job reading today. Now that we've read our book, we want to go back and think of some things. Let's go ahead on page 7. I'm going to clear the page so we have a little bit better of space to work with. I want to know how many words are on this page. Can a scholar raise their hand nice and high so their teacher can call on them? How many words are on this page? Yeah, there's 2 words. The chair. 1, 2. We know these are words because they're letters grouped together and they're separated by a space. So we know there's 2 words. Now that we've counted how many words are on this page, let's go ahead and count how many letters. So letters are standalone by themselves. So we want to count each letter on the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 letters on this page. Great job, scholars. Now that we've done that, I want you to think, what are some other things you might see in a bookstore? You can go ahead and pause this and shout out some answers to your teachers with your hand nice and high so they can call on you. And think of what are some other things you can see at a bookstore. Yeah, that's awesome. Those are all really cool things that we can read or we can see at a bookstore. Great job. Let's see. I know that we read about the snacks. I want to know what we read about before we read about the snacks. So if I want to find out what we read about before, should I turn the page this way or should I go back a page? What did we read about before we read about the snacks? Yeah, we want to turn back a page and look at this. We read about the story before we read about the snacks. Are there only books at a bookstore? do you think, or are there other types of things at a bookstore? You can go ahead and raise your hand and see if your teacher can call on you to share some things, some other things you can read at a bookstore. Yeah, those are all really good answers. At a bookstore, you can see magazines, you can see signs, you can see posters. Those are all different things you can read. Now that we're done reading, I want you to think, what do you think the difference is between the library and a bookstore? Your teacher can call on you and share some answers. What do you think the difference is between a library and a bookstore?